Alright folks, hello and welcome to this video example. In this video we'll be tackling number 6 from the Big Trig Quiz Review Packet, which involves finding two angles of depression and using them in trig equations. So let's take a look at the problem. It says two sailboats are going right behind one another, and they're observed by a pilot who is 125 meters above the ocean. The angles of depression are 14 degrees and 23 degrees. How far apart are the boats? So what we're ultimately looking for is this distance here between the boats. Let's call it D. Now let's label the other information given in the problem. We have our 125 meters, that represents the height here, and that's a vertical height, so that's a right triangle. And we also need to measure those angles of depression. When angles of depression, you're always measuring from the horizontal. So first what I like to do is make a dotted horizontal line, and then I will insert the angles of depression. There's a 23 degree angle and a 14 degree angle. 14 degrees is smaller, so that will represent this angle here on the outside. 23 degrees is a little bit larger, so that will measure from the horizontal down to the second line, and I'll label that 23 degrees. So students sometimes get a little confused or not sure or where to label the angles, and it's just based on which is larger and which is smaller. But the key is it must always be measured from the horizontal. You must always start at the horizontal and bend the angle downward for an angle of depression. If you fail to do that, then you are mislabeling the drawing. Now the next key fact you need is that the angle of depression, let's say take this 14 for example, is actually congruent to the angle of elevation of this triangle. So we know that down here this is also 14 degrees. If you're curious as to why, well, it has to do with the fact that these lines are parallel, the dotted red line and this black line here at the bottom. The ground and that line of sight are parallel, and so this line cutting across forms a transversal, which allows us to declare that the other lines are alternate interior. So therefore I can say that this is 14 degrees because we have alternate interior angles here and here. Furthermore, with this next triangle, I'll use blue, we have alternate interior angles with this whole angle here of 23 degrees and this angle here. They're along the same transversal, and they are both inside of the parallel lines. So I can label here as 23 degrees. Next, once you have those labeled, you've really done the hard part. Now you just have to be extra careful setting up your trig. I'm going to make a blue line here, and I'll call that X. I'm going to make a longer line to the second boat, and I'll call that Y. The theory is, once I can solve both of those equations, I'll be able to subtract X from Y, and that will give me the distance between the boats, which we will call D. So what I need next is an equation for X and an equation for Y. Let's start with X. Looking at this angle here, 23 degrees, I notice that I have an opposite leg. There it is. And I want to find the adjacent leg. So think back to SOHCAHTOA, relating the opposite and adjacent. I will be using the tangent function. So let's write my equation as tangent, oh sorry there folks, SOHCAHTOA. Tangent of 23 degrees equals opposite over adjacent, 125 over X. And then what we learned is that you can interchange the tangent and the X, and so in this case we arrive at X equal to 125 divided by the tangent of 23 degrees. At this point you can plug that into your calculators and see what you get. You find that X is approximately 294.48. Next, let's find Y. To find Y, we'll use a similar tangent equation. Oops, sorry about that, folks. We'll use a similar tangent equation. Tangent of 14 degrees is equal to 125 over Y. So the only difference there is now I'm using this larger triangle to set up my trig equation. And if you do the same fashion, switch the Y and the tangent, you can solve for Y. Y equals 125 over tangent of 14 degrees. And you will arrive at the answer of approximately 501.35. Subtracting those two values, we will arrive at our final answer of D, which is 206.87 meters. That's 206.87 meters, and that will be your final answer. Feel free to rewatch this video to get those steps down and copied into your notebook. Hope it helped, and thanks for watching the video example.